So back to the conference. We are going to introduce you to Victus Sustinere. Apparently, the world's population is approaching 8 billion people, and a huge issue is addressing food sustainability for this population.
Yeah, as of 2011, reportedly there has been 1.3 billion tons of food being wasted, but then there is 1 billion, a population of 1 billion people who are currently malnourished. So these links to poverty and food all are factors to the problem that Victus Sustinere is addressing.
And currently, global climate changes are hindering food production, and famine is currently an ever-growing problem. So we would like to introduce Victus Sustinere, who is proposing a food sustainable program, and this is made up of
Kate Berger, Lan Nguyen, Matthew Anderson, and Adam Book.
Alright, so good morning everyone. We are Team Victus Sustinere, and that's translated from Latin to English as sustainable living. So as global climate change is threatening the security of future food production, we're centrally concerned with combating the negative outcomes of industrial food production by implementing a sustainable food system which is going to meet consumer needs but also not exploit the environment. So these negative outcomes of industrialized food production are increased greenhouse gas emissions, exploitation of limited resources, negative health benefits, also extreme food wastage, and finally negative consumer attitudes and a lack of awareness. So because there's such a wide range of issues that pertain to our problem, we've devised a three-part solution, which later is going to be discussed in great detail, but just to give you a little preview of what's to come. We plan to make urban farms in the middle of the city to grow local and sustainable food, to keep food local. We're going to create an app which is going to be available to anyone on App Store or Android, all of that. And that's going to be able to not only interest the average consumer towards sustainable foods, but also educate them. And then finally, we are also going to have a food labeling system, which is going to be like a uniform little badge. And we're going to put that on all sustainable foods in the grocery store. And so that way people know that it's just as convenient to buy sustainable food compared to just the average food that you normally get at the grocery store. So since there are three very different parts to our solution, we're going to have one committee for the whole city called the Local Food Committee. And they're going to be in charge of organizing our entire three-part solution as one cohesive unit and keeping it all implemented together as one organized bit.
Okay, so I'm going to discuss the first part of the problem, which is climate change. So I'm guessing you all have some basic knowledge of global climate change. It's such a pressing issue that receives a lot of attention. Some scholars have actually described it as possibly the most urgent one. So what climate change is the increase in global temperatures as a result of too much man-made carbon dioxide emissions. And this causes an increased frequency in extreme weather patterns, which has a negative effect on food production. So what is the current state of food production? Well, currently agriculture is very centralized, and then it's shipped in mass quantities around the world. For example, China produces 30% of the world's cereal products. Now, as climate change continues to put a strain on food production and the world's population continues to increase, this is not going to be a sustainable method of supplying everyone with food. In fact, trying to do so is only adding to the problem by adding more carbon dioxide emissions. So clearly something needs to be done. Now, Lan is going to discuss food waste and how that's also adding to this problem.
So another major problem of industrialized food production is food waste. And the next video that we will present to you will illustrate the extent of this problem. So here it is.
Oh, you haven't got your volume plugged in.
How do you do the volume plugin?
Yeah, just pause it for a second.
Okay, sorry.
Future.
Where is it?
I didn't know there was two plugs.
Yeah, there's two plugs. Now you all know. Two plugs to plug in your computer.
Yet in Europe and North America, each consumer wastes 210 to 250 pounds.
You just drag it back. There we go. Sorry about that.
We grow and produce enough food for everyone on the planet. Yet there are 870 million hungry people on the planet, and 2.5 million children die of malnutrition every year. Worldwide, we produce 27% more food per person today than we did 50 years ago, even as the global population has more than doubled. Yet in Europe and North America, each consumer wastes 210 to 250 pounds of food per year. As millions of people go to bed hungry, half of the food produced in the United States is wasted between the farm and the fork, discarded as a result of the inefficiency in the human-managed food chain. In the US, nearly 8% of the food is lost in production. The food industry loses 4%, supermarkets are responsible for 6%, restaurants contribute 15% of the food in landfills, households throw away nearly 25% of the food they buy. The cost of this waste is about $165 billion annually. That's more than 5 times as much as we spent on foreign economic aid in 2011. This waste doesn't only affect people, the environment suffers from it as well. Did you know throwing away 1 gallon of milk is like throwing away 1,000 gallons of water? That's because it takes that much fresh water to produce 1 gallon of milk. A quarter of our water used for irrigation is used on food that is wasted. So when you throw away your food, you are throwing away all the water that it takes to grow, produce, and ship it as well. On top of that, an estimated 16% of methane emissions from our landfills are caused by food waste. By saving 15% of the food we normally throw away, we can feed more than 25 million Americans every year. If we start paying attention to what we waste, we can end up saving a lot more than just leftovers.
So as you guys can see, the video has many powerful messages, one of which is wasting food is not ethical due to the high level of food insecurity worldwide. The second is that a waste of food is also a waste of all the resources required to produce it. And food wastage contributes to global climate change by generating an unnecessary level of CO2 and methane. Now I will pass it on to Matt, who will discuss the health issues.
Now, scientific research has linked our industrialized food system to a lack of consumer consumption awareness. What this is leading to is several negative health effects. These health effects include an increase in obesity, an increase in cardiovascular disease, an increase in cancer, and furthermore, an increase in chemical contamination. For example, back in 2007, if you're aware, there was a severe melamine contamination in baby products in China. As a matter of fact, children were consuming as much as 120 times the recommended limit of melamine, which is a plastic product, in their daily diet. This is a severe concern for us, and research is showing a positive correlation between the industrialized food system and these negative health effects. At this point, I'm going to pass it forward to Adam, who's going to outline awareness issues with the industrialized food system.
Yeah, so there are 2 main abstract barriers which are keeping a sustainable food system from success. And so those 2 would be negative attitudes towards sustainable foods and also a lack of awareness because no one really knows that much about them yet. So studies have shown that when the average consumer goes into the grocery store to buy their groceries for the week, the things that most concern them in no particular order are brand familiarity, quality, price, and finally convenience. Now the lack of awareness towards sustainable foods makes it so that the average consumer isn't aware that it's just as good quality as sustainable food. It's just as equal or better quality, and it's also just as convenient to get. As they're in the stores, they're just not as well known. And now these 2 issues lead to sustainable foods not becoming familiar brands. So now I got 3 out of the 4 things sustainable foods to the uneducated consumer they don't know about. So now this lack of awareness leads to negative attitudes towards sustainable foods because without knowing about the quality or the convenience, most uneducated consumers could say that sustainable foods are just more expensive, less convenient foods when they can just get simple industrial made ones at the store. So this lack of awareness and negative attitude create a cycle which greatly inhibit the success of sustainable foods. So now we're going to talk about the solution and how we propose to fix this whole problem.
So step 1 of our solution involves implementing local farms on rooftop terraces, schoolyards, and in volunteer backyards. Now, Kate has previously mentioned there's a severe issue with imported cereal crops, and our plan is to introduce an aerobic cereal plantation into individuals' backyards to further reduce how much imported crops we use. Now, what this plan involves is getting volunteers to use their backyards to plant this crop. It involves getting in schoolyards, which can also help with the awareness for younger generations, and also rooftop terraces to minimize the amount of space we're using. At this point, I'm going to pass it back to
Kate will explain the food labeling system that we have Okay.
So to combat the issue of consumer awareness, we've designed a food labeling system that features this uniform, easily identifiable symbol. So how many of you, when you go to the grocery store, do you read the entire ingredients list on everything you buy?
Read the little nutrition thing.
There's 2 people. So this is why we have proposed that we have a symbol so that consumers can have this information readily available to them without having to search through all the fine print. However, we want to have a QR code next to the symbol so you can scan it if you do want more detailed information on how your product came to the store and how it was produced. So this symbol will be implemented on products by our Sustainable Food Committee, which Adam will discuss later. There are 3 criteria for this symbol, the first of which is whether it was produced within 1,000 kilometers, and then the second 2 are the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions and the reduction of food waste during production.
Since our team have all agreed that education is key, we have made a game. It is going to be called Sustinere, and it will have virtual storytelling embedded with clues to teach participants or players about sustainable farming. So the task or the goal is to create a virtual garden based on the knowledge provided in the clues, and you will create a virtual plot, care for it, and basically your goal is to gain sustainable points. Now, sustainable points can be gained by 2 ways. The first is by your farming skills, so your knowledge on sustainable farming practice and your ability to care for your plot. The second is mentioned by Kate by purchasing sustainable products and scanning the QR code that is going to earn you more sustainable points. Now you may ask, what are sustainable points? Why do I want them? Well, here's the catch. Well, once a set number of sustainable points is reached, you will be able to turn it in to a sustainable committee, which Adam later will address. And what they will do is send supplies and helpers for you to help implement your virtual garden in your own backyard. So now Kate will address how we will plan to advertise this game.
Okay, so can I get a show of hands? How many people have a smartphone or some sort of device like that? A lot of people do, right? So harnessing this is a great way to get our cause out there. So you can use this on apps on your phone, and you can also play it through Facebook and compete with your friends, which is it's fun for a lot of people, and studies have shown that this is a new social phenomenon, and games like Farmville over Facebook, people are willing to invest so much time into them, and it spreads so quickly through all of your friends and things like that over the internet. And it's really surprising to us that no one's tried to harness this as a tool for social change. If you think about all those apps on all these smartphones and all these games on Facebook, we can use that to really create something. We created a Facebook page for it here, so we just have a screenshot of it. Yeah.
Why do we believe that it will succeed? Well, first, it is competitive, and that's always a motivation. So you will have to compete with all the other players, your friends, and to achieve the best, most sustainable plot. Secondly, it appeals to all ages. So there's no restriction on age. What matters is the knowledge acquired through the game. There's a real-world incentive to play because once the set number of sustainable points are reached, the Sustainability Committee will help bring your virtual garden to life. And the educational game will allow you to gain knowledge beforehand so that when your garden is implemented, you will be able to know how to care for your garden. Because according to us, there is no point at helping citizens have a garden in their backyard without knowing the proper techniques to take care of it. And lastly, it will be easily accessible to all potential players. Now, Adam is going to talk to us about the famous committee.
All right, so what is this committee that everyone has mentioned so many times so far? Basically, we have 3 really different, very unique and intricate parts of our solution. And since it might be a hassle to keep track of 3 very different things all at once and all implement them at the same time, we have created this local food committee. And they're going to be in charge of organizing all of our solutions and implementing them all at the same time as one cohesive group. So they're going to be in charge of everything from managing and updating our app, implementing these urban farms, and also they're going to be in charge of getting our label onto each and every sustainable food product in the grocery store. So the other thing that the committee is going to be in charge of is going to be our budget and allocating how much of the money we earn goes to which part of our solution. And so now Matt's going to talk about the actual numbers.
So essentially, we capped out our budget at $2 million. Our research indicates that it will cost approximately $450,000 for our farming in the city initiative, or our urban farms. Furthermore, to develop the app, we plan to use about $50,000, bringing our current total to $500,000. The remaining $1.5 million will go to our labeling initiative, in addition to helping start up our organizing committee. And what we plan to do with the remaining $18 million is put it into a bank with an annual return of 2% interest. And with that interest, we plan to continue funding our labeling initiative into the future, given that we can make about $360,000 a year just off of interest. So with that being said, we're extremely excited about our solution. We really believe that we have a concrete initiative to develop a sustainable food system based off of Vancouver for the future, and we plan on being a role model for other cities to sort of step their game up and become a part of this movement. Now, a lot of it evolves around education, and with our education plan, we really hope to create a generation of sustainable eaters. With that being said, we hope you can look forward into the future and we can avoid food crises such as one proposed in 2050, where we might not even be able to rely on international foods because the situation will be that serious. Thank you.
And now we would like to take any questions for the group. I have a question. So usually games for these apps are for demographics in their teens and stuff like that. How are you going to attract people over ages of 30 or over maybe mid-20s to this app, which is your primary goal for teaching people about sustainability?
Well, through Facebook, it might appeal to all ages. I know that a lot of people who send me farm bill requests are not in their teens, so yeah.
Okay. And also, Also, we have the labeling in the grocery store, which is going to be a lot more apparent to people in older demographics, because you don't usually find teenagers or younger kids who are going to be focused on the app mostly, grocery shopping, right? So the people who wouldn't have the app would be seeing our sustainable logo, and then they'd be curious about that, and they could find out more about that from our website. The youngest demographic would be playing the app, and somewhere in between would have a balance of the two. So no matter what, everyone's getting a bunch of awareness about sustainability.
And also you mentioned that the teen is going to be attracted to the app, the most attracted to the app. But they are going to grow up and be the next consumers, and they will be the ones. So we are centrally concerned to target them, because they will be the one growing up and contributing to this food chain.
And
So, how much food do you think you'll be able to produce in these urban farms compared to the food needs of the city?
Well,
Sorry, can you please repeat the question? I missed it.
For this to be sustainable, how much food from these urban farms will be produced compared to the actual food needs of the city?
At this point, that's a really good consideration. Our research has yet to divulge into that aspect, so at this point, we're not completely sure.
but what we're hoping is that the food produced in the garden it's a slow implementation. So we are not cutting off market food. We are just slowly trying to have people learn about sustainable practice, slowly implementing it in their own backyard. And so from my experience, I have a garden myself. My family grows a garden in our backyard. So it's really nice to have local vegetables, seasonal vegetables every year. And it's not enough to provide enough food for us to eat the whole season, but it helps. And it's enjoyable to have your own garden.
You mentioned growing grains on these urban farms. I'm just wondering exactly how practical is that? Like, do you think you would be able to grow enough grain for that? Because to grow grain, you need large tracts of open land. It's very labor intensive. You need to plow the land. Harvesting the grain is a very difficult process without automated farm machinery. I'm just wondering, like, is there enough space in the city to make that practical?
When we say cereal products, we don't necessarily mean grain. The one that I'm most interested in through like my own personal research is aerobic rice. So that's most rice grows in like a swamp type area, but they come up with one that can grow in soil. And so this would be easily implemented in urban farms, and that would help take the strain off of soil products that are imported overseas.
And once again, we're not cutting off all the resources. We're slowly implementing it into the system.
Well, okay. I really like the idea about the just promoting the idea of sustainability, because I think people will definitely be interested in learning about more where their food comes from. So I think that you touched on that really well. But I guess you did bring up food wastage as a whole in terms of like what people are doing with the food in their own homes. I think you did bring that up as like a very large problem, and I was wondering how that might fit into your solution in terms of like how are you going to get people to stop wasting the food that they get in restaurants? Because this might not be coming from the sustainable route that you are promoting.
Well, what we feel that is that because people are disconnected from the food production, a lot of people do not know how where their food comes from, how it is grown. So we were hoping that with the sustainable label, which give the buyers, the consumer, more information of how it is the effect that it has on the environment, so food wastage and global climate change and CO2 and methane release, they will be more aware of of their action when they waste food. Because when you waste food, a lot of this food goes to landfill, and it generates a lot of CO2 and methane into the environment.
And if I can just add on that, many studies have shown that if you grow it yourself and you put like all that time into it in your own urban garden, you're less likely to waste it rather than going to the store, picking up like a box of processed stuff and then throwing it out.
Yeah, and along with that too, I'll say that being a gardener myself, that fresh vegetables are so good that once you do grow a few of your own, you look at the grocery store food and go, oh my goodness. But anyway, for me, I think one of the most interesting parts of your solution is this idea of an app for social change. And you mentioned that apps aren't being used as tools for social change. I don't have a smartphone. So I'm not, I'm familiar, I know what an app is and I know what some of them do, but really, they're not being employed along those lines at all?
Well, there might be some, but in terms of gaming apps, there's nothing like this.
Oh, that's really interesting. Because I'm
Really
just thinking,
fun.
no, but I'm just thinking about Will's comment, the idea of the food wastage and how to fit this into your plan. And then I'm wondering, well, why not an app game that teaches people not to waste food? I mean, you could make a number of different games that have to do with teaching sustainability.
And in our game, like it has different levels, and how it works is there's like a storyline. It gives you a virtual story, and then you play the game.
Yeah.
So it could be implemented into one of the levels.
Or you could make why not start producing apps for social change that are concerned about sustainability? There's so much you could teach. So much.
So usually sustainable foods will cost more than the regular counterparts. So how will these foods only be limited to the people who have the money to buy them? And also with the urban farms, it seems like it would require a lot of space. So that also limited to people who have large areas of land as their home.
So I'll answer the cost question. It's been shown by a couple studies that I've read in my personal research that in some towns where they have actual business agreements with the farmers markets, that the farmers don't charge as much. The reason that sometimes organic foods and sustainable foods cost more is because farmers don't have a guarantee that it's going to get sold because of the awareness issues. And then when our committee would be able to negotiate with these farmers and these sustainably grown foods, then they would have an assurance that they're going to be able to have their foods in a busy area like a supermarket, and then they won't need to charge as much because they'll be able to move more, and it won't be as economically not viable. And then, what was your second question?
With the urban farms, it seems like it requires a lot of space, personal garden. Maybe like someone living in an apartment won't have that space.
That's the rooftop. Rooftop terrace.
Urban farm is to use the unused space in the city, so under SkyTrain or rooftop, to grow for the local community. And that is separate from the game, which is which is separate from the game.
Also, just to add on that quickly before we move to the next question, I don't know how many of you are actually from Vancouver, but along Arbutus, there's that old railroad track. Like that entire piece of land, it goes all the way up to almost to the water, like through just forest land.
It takes 2 hours from 70th to the water.
Yeah, that's all land that we can use because no trains go there. There's nothing doing there other than now hopefully a sustainable garden.
There's also already a number of gardens along that.
Yeah,
train
they have
track
little
that
plots.
People have just put in.
And can I add a comment? I feel that this movement can really push forward because even where I'm living, which is near Central High School area or like Metrotown area, I see that around my home there has been an increasing number of small local family-owned farms, and so I feel that people and those farms are becoming more and more successful every year. So I feel that people, once they know how good it is, or to eat local food, or to be able to taste the difference between local grown food and industrialized food production, they will be willing to participate and to maybe pay that extra cost.
Okay, we should take one more question. So, James.
Okay, first I want to mention that I really like the part about the interest returns. This makes it really economically sustainable in addition to being environmentally sustainable. And I'd like to suggest that, like, in addition to this, for example, this plan that you're making could be implemented in any city or in an environment. And you can use, for example, the returns to like maybe promote like conferences that brings many different cities, like major cities or even small cities, or even like rural areas together to like implement ideas like this and be able to, like, for example, give out grants to things like that as well.
Yeah, that was the general plan, was to have this as like a model city that other cities can use, and then we can create global change.
Part of the interest that we make, part of the money, part of the plan, which wasn't mentioned, unfortunately, but part of the plan was that we would take some of the money once it takes off in Vancouver, then to expand into suburbs. We'd start in Vancouver, we could go to like Richmond and all the way out, and then eventually all over the place. You'd start in major cities and all like the provinces, for example, and then it'll take off there and it'll start spreading, and hopefully eventually the whole world will be lots more sustainable.
Since the app is easily accessible to everyone around the world, so let's say a player from India wants to play, and then sends a friend request to his friend, and then it expands over there. We hope that looking at our committee, then it will inspire a committee similar to that in India, who will follow our plan and help implement it in their community.
Okay, back in. So that ends our day for the first day of this conference. We would like to thank again Victus, Sustinere, and Team Apollo for trying to help the world in their own way of education and food sustainability. So thank you.
Continue on Thursday with Health for All, OpenGM, and Farm Forward.
Yes.
And don't forget to bring your reusable cups and containers for more food.
Yeah.
So, and also as you're leaving, you can also grab some juice and cake. We don't want to take it home. We don't want to waste food, okay guys?
We can take some back to my office if there's extra. I just want to take a moment to thank the two teams for really setting a nice high bar. Excellent work, you guys. Really interesting, and the class did a fantastic discussion and the good questions. Thanks, guys. See you on Thursday. I can't wait.